Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 23rd meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. The first item on the agenda this evening is the minutes of the Council meeting held October 16th, 2017. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Next item is the approval of the agenda. That the heading of new business be added to the October 23rd, 2017 Council meeting agenda prior to the agenda item special business, and the headings be renumbered accordingly. And that the October 23rd, 2017 Council meeting agenda be approved as amended. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beale. I'll read it under new business. It has to do, you have a copy of it in front of you. It's a letter from the Regional District of Nanaimo Board Composition and Voting Strength. So we'll deal with that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, the first item we have is the City of Parksville's comments on cannabis regulation. And I need a mover and a seconder for I can take them all together, Mrs. Comas, for the 8 recommendations. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by, do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Burden. Okay, so Mrs. Kaler, would you please give us a rundown on the survey that was done and everybody that was contacted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the last council meeting, we presented a report to council outlining the province's efforts to consult with local governments on a regime for legalizing cannabis starting next July. The councillors provided some information on the recommendation that was put forward last week, and staff compiled the majority for each of the items into this suggested resolution. Does council want me to go through them one by one, or is everybody... There was a lot of agreement from the members of council, and so we tried to compile that into this resolution for council to consider.
I'd just like to point out before we go around the table that Councillor Oates made a comment. I believe I was the first one off the mark. Councillor Oates made a comment that he agreed with what I had put in. That's rare. I'm gonna frame that. He agreed with my comments, with the exception of the retail model. He made some comments there. So how do we want to deal with this, Council? Does anybody feel strongly objections to anything that's in here that want to discuss? Councillor Beale, you go first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Some of my comments may have differed slightly from others, but there is one that I am concerned about, and that's item 3, and it's regarding the gram limit not for the adult public possession. I would agree with the 30 grams, but for the youth. And I guess I want to be sure that my understanding of what was set out was correct. One possibility was that youth be allowed 5 grams for possession, and another was that it be set at 0 grams. Understanding, and this was what I understood, is that nonetheless that did not mean that if any youth was found in possession of a small amount, that would allow the RCMP, for instance, to confiscate that amount, but there would be no criminal record. Now, this is what I would support. I'm thinking about, and I think about the parallel with alcohol use. And so if we're saying that alcohol use is at a certain age limit, which it is, and if youth are found to be in possession of alcohol and they're below that age limit, they are not permitted to keep it, from my understanding. So if you're going down the street or you're in the park and you've got a beer and so on and you're underage, that can be removed. But there's no criminal record. There may or may not be a fine. I don't know about all of that, but there's no criminal record. I have trouble saying that we've got an age that's legal, and yet we are going to suggest that youth underage be allowed to possess 5 grams legally. I see that as a contradiction. I do not want to see a criminal charge, but I would like to see a mechanism by which that anything small amounts can just be removed.
Mrs. Kaler, when I read it, that wasn't my interpretation. I didn't want somebody who was 15 years old to have a criminal record. That's why I left it. I stayed with the status quo. What's the story here?
So I don't really know that much about the criminal code, but the way I read what the province put out was that basically they wouldn't be given a criminal record for any of it. It's the same with alcohol. The police officers can confiscate, and they could decide to issue a ticket like they do for alcohol possession. I think from some of the discussions I've had with other city staff and solicitors at last week's corporate officer forum, it could be to get around the medical marijuana, that a child of 15 or 16 or 17 may have a prescription for a small amount of medical marijuana, but it wasn't really explicit in the information that I read from the province, why else they would allow a small amount.
Councillor Burton, you had your hand up, and then Councillor Salter. Councillor Salter, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that was actually something that I didn't get either, was if the age is 19 and the person's under 19, why is that okay then? It's not okay for them to be drinking. Why would it be okay? And even if this is an RX for them for an illness that they have, then likely they would be taking it at home. I'm not sure that they would be carrying it on their person. That's odd to me. And I also think that it's a little bit of a conundrum even for the police. I could see it causing more problems than it should. If you're underage, you can't drive, you don't get the car keys, you don't get, and the other piece is you don't get to carry alcohol in public. I can't either, even though I'm of age. I can't run around with a beer can in my hand. So no one does. So that one has me a little bit confused. One more thing that I wanted to mention, though, was with regard to distribution. I absolutely agree with the liquor store model of distributing, because they're already doing the exact same thing with liquor. So they already know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. They've got all sorts of checks and balances in place, and I think that's far better than these pop-up distribution centers that are happening throughout the city.
Councillor Powell, sorry, Mrs. Comas, and then Councillor Powell.
Yes, Your Worship. Just to clarify, even if council made it 0 grams for under 19, it's still not a criminal offence because the criminal code's governed by the federal government. It could be a ticketable offence if council wished to make it that way, but it certainly isn't going to be a criminal offence.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was under the understanding that, I like the argument. I was under the understanding that we were supposed to make comments on our preferences, and then this was supposed to be submitted to the province. And so this isn't, at this meeting, we don't have to necessarily agree with what the other councillors have put down. It's just something to submit from this meeting. Is that a motion that we have to have?
Yeah, we should send something to the province. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what we were discussing at the staff level, again, with a lawyer recently, was that there would be more weight if there's a council resolution and some consensus at council, but we can certainly submit different opinions or comments separately from council in a letter. And then if there are elements that our council agrees on and feels more strongly on, we can kind of put that extra weight in a resolution and then provide comments as well, with a covering letter. And the other thing to point out is that there is an open forum right now for individuals who wish to provide their comments as well. So councillors are, of course, free to, submit their comments there. But what we had heard from a municipal solicitor is that the province will consider, this is what he assumes anyway, a resolution of council with a little bit more seriousness, I suppose, than just individual comments from people who happen to be counselors as well.
And council, we have a deadline for November the 1st, and this is embryonic. There's going to be, I would imagine, there's going to be all sorts of adjustments and changes between now and July the 1st. But I frankly felt, in looking at everybody's comments and looking at the list that was prepared by staff, I don't know about the rest of council, but I can live with this as a first foray to the provincial government. I mean, there are going to be dictates by the federal government and by the provincial government, and we'll probably end up, holding the bag, so to speak. We'll have to do whatever comes our way, but at least I thought that all of these things were fairly reasonable. Okay, further discussion. Councillor Beale.
Thank you. I guess just once again, I had thought that perhaps that youth limit, the way it was written out, may have caused a bit of confusion. So again, I think I'm looking for a nod or a shake from Mrs. Kaler that my interpretation was correct, that if we had it set at 0 grams, there would be no criminal record, but it would allow, I think, picking up again on something that Councillor Salter mentioned, that it could cause a conundrum, as you say, for the RCMP. I could easily imagine scenarios where a group of youth, it's like, quickly let's spread the joints, you know what I mean? And so, and I do appreciate Councillor Powell's statement that this is our recommendations, but it's the only one that I do feel that, would be worth adjusting. And so perhaps with that, could I make an amendment to that particular?
You want to make a motion to amend
A motion to amend item 3 and have that youth be set at 0 grams.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Salter. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Burden.
So many people around. They're all watching on TV. Hi. I just want to make sure that a young person who is possibly caught with a joint in their possession doesn't end up with a criminal record. Now, having said that, they'd be a young offender, and unless they were 18, that would make a difference. That's my concern, okay? And so I put the 5 gram limit at that point, except for under 16, which I think we want to. I think we do want to draw a line in the sand of some sort in terms of further action, and maybe not necessarily police action. But if a kid's, out and about with his friends and has a joint, and the police arrest him, and I don't want there to be those kinds of serious consequences.
Any other comments before I call the vote? Councillor Oates.
So the proposal, the document that we received at the council meeting on the 16th, was it? That proposal was is this guideline, this template is sort of from the government? Like this 5 gram, where did this 5 gram number come from? This came from at the suggestion of the government?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Oates, the discussion paper that was attached last week was written by representatives from the provincial government.
Okay, that's what I thought. So what we're trying, and the concern, some of the concern is about a criminal record, and when in fact that this is what this will ensure won't happen. Anything with 5 grams or less, you won't get a criminal record. We don't have the ability to write the criminal code. I'm not convinced why we should go from 5 to 0 if the province is suggesting that youth should be able to have it for medical reasons, is what I'm understanding. So I'm not sure why we would want to discriminate based on age.
Mrs. Comas.
Your Worship, to try and help to clarify this, first of all, this is dealing with recreational marijuana, not medical marijuana. The medical marijuana legislation is staying the same. So if you're a 14-year-old with the need for medical marijuana, you can still have your marijuana. It's not reflected under this. What the government is suggesting is a 5-gram limit for youth. And they are asking for council's input and the public's input on those numbers. So you could suggest 0 grams, you could suggest 10 grams. The province is going to take what your suggestion is and incorporate it into the legislation. So you're not guaranteed by putting through this resolution that it would be 0 grams. It's council's viewpoint on what it should be that the province should enact as legislation.
It's 12 of one and a dozen of the other. Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, that was what I was going to say, was we're not writing the criminal code, of course. We're simply they've asked for our input. We're giving our input. Councillor Beal has stated, you know, I feel comfortable with 0. I feel comfortable with 0. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's all kinds of things I'd like to see happen to the criminal code, but who cares?
Okay, let's call the vote on the motion made by Councillor Beal. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that fails. So it fails. Yeah. So things stay the same. Okay, so I'm going to call the vote on the numbers 1 to 8, so that we can let the provincial level of government know what we're going for. So I need a mover and a seconder for 1 to 8. Councillor Burton, second. We've done that. I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm going to call the vote on the numbers 1 to 8. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. You didn't raise your hand. Does that mean you're in favor? You can smoke it. Fuck. I take that one. That's not nice. I won't talk about where you come from. Okay. Moving on. We have one bylaw for final adoption. That's the Parks Dedication Bylaw 2017, number 1537. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Oates, seconded by Councillor Powell. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, you have before you, Council, I'm going to give you, before I ask for a mover and a seconder, I'm going to give you the Coles Notes version. The RDN board, when the census was taken in 2016, we were contacted by the province, and the RDN board said, no, we don't want to increase the number of representatives, one from Nanaimo and one from Parksville, based on the fact that it's worked out well, and we like the status quo. Nevertheless, this is a senior level of government, and they wrote to the RDN board saying, as of November 1st, we're telling you that as a result of the survey taken in 2016, we want to give you, whether you like it or not, we're going to give you 2 new RDN board members, one from the city of Nanaimo and one from the city of Parksville. So there's a deadline for this. This has to start on the 1st of November officially, and I'm proposing. I'll need a motion. I can't make a motion, but rather than reinvent the wheel on this, I would propose that Councillor Oates be the second representative, because he's the alternate at this point in time. And then I can name an alternate. I'm only going to name one alternate for the 2 of us, because we don't need 2 alternates. So I'm going to put that out there that the correspondence, you've got the recommendations there on that page. So moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion on the recommendations? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question is, what is the number right now for Nanaimo? Because it says that it's seeking to change its voting unit from 2,750. And I recall when I was Director Fell's second, that Nanaimo continued to get extra votes, and I mean, we all, or most of us should know, that Nanaimo will take a vote if they decide to. If they want to, they can have it. So at this point, changing this, giving Parksville actually, it's really only one additional vote, and then you're going to have a second, or like somebody to cover. Well, Parksville receives one additional vote. So if the following sees an increase in voting strength, the additional municipal votes will need to be allocated among municipal directors. City of Nanaimo receives 3, City of Parksville receives 1, electoral area F receives 1 additional vote. Because at this point we don't have 1 addition, or 1 and 1 and 3. But I'm just wondering, what's Nanaimo? What is Nanaimo going to end up with? Because I know that they were getting extra votes again. So what are they going to end up with? I'm interested to know that. I want to see where we're going to be as far as strategic.
Nanaimo goes from what they have now for one more. I forget, what's that? They have
it says 37 then? So it's 37.
It's this page here.
Yeah. So there's 2 years 6.
Instead of 7, they get 8. But even when they had 7,
which they always
if Nanaimo decides to vote en bloc, they win every time.
I know.
That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been.
Democratic. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up. It's important, and I think it's important that that our residents and others are aware of this. So that's why I brought it up. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I understand it very well.
It's no doubt a frustration because we've talked about that from time to time, especially at the electoral area districts, that if Nanaimo decides to vote in bloc,
which they do, and they did when I was there. I did bring it up, but yeah, they continue to get additional votes. Yeah.
And by us getting an extra vote, it doesn't affect the fact that Nanaimo has the big whack.
That's correct.
So I need a mover and a seconder for the 2 recommendations with regard to that, and I've got that. I have a mover and a seconder. Okay, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Now I might add that the regional district is making a big effort to go back to the province and return it to what it was, because we don't want the extra cost. Nanaimo doesn't want the extra cost, and the RDN doesn't like the setup anyway. So we'll be dealing with that, and I'll get back to you on that as time goes by. Okay. All right. Before we go into special business, we have somebody has a birthday tonight.
No, I think you have one other thing.
Did I? No. Okay, I can do that now. I can do that now, Mrs. Gomez? I was going to do the alternate. No, it's not. Okay, so for the alternate, I'm going to propose for your consideration, Councillor Beal for the alternate. We only need 1 alternate because it's very odd that the 2 of us would miss the meeting. So can I have a mover and a second?